You ever have that one boss that you fight and you're just all...
No.
But then when you go online, it turns out everybody loves the boss for some reason. And you're just sitting there thinking, why? Well, that's a phenomenon we're going to be looking into today with a video by Arkade, with a K. He has a list of the most overrated and underrated bosses in each Souls game. I'm going to try not to be too upset about this. This is a very subjective thing. This is a very, subjective sort of list. So, let's get into this. And obviously, I don't have Demon Souls or Bloodborne. Forgive me.
Dark Souls 1.
Start with
the
Dark
most
Souls.
overrated boss in Dark Souls 1, in my opinion, is definitely Ornstein and Smough. Now put your pitchforks down and let me explain myself.
No, never.
Ornstein
Get your pitchforks
and Smough is
out.
a good fight.
Everybody.
Don't get me wrong. They provide a good challenge. They're still one of the better duo fights in the actual series. And even though they were a duo fight, they were well balanced. Ornstein being the smaller, fast one, while Smough being the slower but heavy.
So why?
One.
So what's overrated then?
But man, the way a lot of people described them at first made me believe that they are genuinely the best boss fight in the entire game. Now, I'm not saying that people aren't allowed to think that, but I was just a bit disappointed by them. Maybe it's the slower paced combat that's the issue, but I still found more enjoyment fighting Artorias, so...
Artorias being a more fun fight, I don't think anyone's going to think it's a hot take. I can see where he's coming from, though. The sort of balance of what they actually are versus community description of it. So because he explained himself, not that bad of a take. I don't think, understand. It's still a great fight. He's setting the right standards of a Dark Souls fight, so not a bad take.
Now for the most underrated boss in the game,
who's underrated?
Quelaag. Now am I saying that Quelaag is better than Ornstein and Smough? No, but she's a decent boss that doesn't get enough credit. I mean, to this day, I'm still shocked by how good her visual design is. The beautiful face and human upper body to the horrifying spider arachnid lower body.
I think he almost stole my answer. Granted, I don't know my answer quite. Quelaag's up there, though. I mean, it's closer to an actual, good boss fight that isn't super gimmicky. You can call the lava thing kind of gimmicky, but, at least she's got other attacks that can throw you off guard. And she's also got a crap ton of health, so she's kind of hard to blaze through. Pun intended. But I think the most underrated boss fight is probably the Bell Gargoyles. The Bell Gargoyles are the pinnacle of teaching the players how to manage a gank fight, like a duo fight. And they're just a pretty solid challenge overall. You don't have a really strong weapon. They can take a bit of reaction time maneuvering and definitely teaches you how to get used to that pace of combat. And you can always bring Solaire along if you wish. As far as overrated in Dark Souls 1, there's not many, because Dark Souls 1's standard for bosses aren't nearly as high as other games. No one's really looking at some of these bosses in reverence, necessarily. I think the most overrated boss, if I had to think about his own criteria, maybe Sif, because Sif realistically only has 3 attacks that all look very similar. But the meme of being the bestest doggo is kind of elevated Sif to this godly Souls boss position. So maybe Sif for the memes. I can't really think of anybody else. If anything, any of the bosses are underrated. But for everybody else, I think they're well ranked amongst the community. We know whether a boss is really good or bad, because Dark Souls 1, it has an iffy standard of bosses.
Dark Souls 2. Now when it
Dark Souls 2. That's an interesting one. I'm interested.
On the bosses in Dark Souls 2, a lot of them happens to be mid and not memorable.
Fair enough.
I know what you guys are
not
thinking.
Wrong.
Well, Dark Souls 1 had a lot of mid bosses, which is true.
True.
But at least the bosses in Dark Souls 1 were a bit more memorable.
True. You had Persilla, who was this half dragon, half human, could turn invisible, had a cool scythe. It was in the painted world in the snowy area. And then you had Seath the Scaleless, who was one of the few dragon-esque enemies, if you want to call him that. He kind of slithered around because of all the experiments he did. Then you had Gravelord Nito, just a big pile of skeletons and souls all mashed together, and he had skeletons around him that you had to have a divine weapon to take down. Lots of cool, just sort of unique designs, unique mechanics. Dark Souls 2, not so much.
And even the most diehard 2 fans can admit this as well.
There
are some gems among the rocks.
I do love Dark Souls 2.
Some of them being Fume Knight, Suralon, and Ivory King. However, one of the
all DLC bosses, by the way.
Thing that gets a bit too much praise, in my opinion, is Dark Lurker. Now, before I...
In my experience, I didn't know anything about Dark Lurker. I knew roughly what it looked like based on a wiki picture. I had no clue how to get to it. I looked up how to get to it, and when I got to the boss fight itself, I was like, oh dang. Looks cool. Sounds cool. Arena's kind of cool, even if it's just a big dark cave. And the fight was surprisingly tight for Dark Souls 2. I was really surprised from Dark Souls 2 standards. If this was a Dark Souls 1 or 3 fight, maybe it wouldn't stand out all that much. But for Dark Souls 2 standards, I thought Dark Lurker was pretty awesome. But anyways.
Say anything negative, the design of Dark Lurker is cool. I like the whole
I do love
angel thing going on.
I love the lore bit on that one.
Cool as well. However, the boss fight itself is rather mid. It's literally just a glorified duo fight, and having to focus on two enemies throwing bullshit at you all at once isn't super fun. No, I'm not saying that duo fights in general aren't fun, because they can be, and I'm also not saying that this is one of the worst ones, because it isn't. However, something in this boss fight just didn't click for me, how it did for everyone else. Maybe the
it has a really good moveset by itself, but it's a bit too easy by itself, so when it duplicates itself, they can get a little magic spammy on you, I'll agree.
Annoying runback was the main reason, as in my mind I thought the runback being this long and terrible was because it was hiding something good, which in this case it just felt like a letdown.
It didn't feel like a letdown, again, relatively speaking, but yeah, that boss runback is really bad, probably one of the worst of the game if you ask me.
Now for an underrated boss fight in Dark Souls 2, we have Looking Glass Knight.
Looking Glass Knight, what the crap? He is one of the more unique guys in Armor, I suppose, with the gimmick of him pulling a guy out of the mirror. Yeah, he's under. Looking Glass Knight's pretty cool.
This is one of the most visually pleasing boss battles in the entire game, and shit, dare I say, maybe in the entire series.
Run that by me again? Did I mishear that?
Battles in the entire game, and shit, dare I say, maybe in the entire series.
What?
It's definitely in the top 15 for sure.
15, okay.
Now the reason why visuals gets a lot of praise from me is because
a
lot of the other bosses tend to be in very gray and dull looking areas, while you have the Looking Glass Knight in his shiny armor on top of a castle with rain and lightning.
Observe the image in front of you. What doth thou see here? Lots of gray, with only lightning really breaking the monotony of things, and slightly shinier armor. Whoop-de-doo. Okay, I'll admit, this one's pretty freaking stupid. The Looking Glass Knight, it's not a bad fight. It's a good fight. It's a good boss. But underrated to such a degree, to call it the most underrated boss, it's his opinion, I get it, but really? Just the visuals make it underrated? He's not really anything special amongst Dark Souls 2 bosses. He swings and shoots lightning sometimes, like along the ground, like, okay, cool, but it's not exactly special, not something super unique, you know? Looking Glass Knight. I'm not vibing with this one. I'm gonna keep it real with you. This one's a no-go. This takes weird. This takes borderline bad. He can think what he wants to, but no other boss in Dark Souls 2 would fit the underrated category. Okay.
It's a spectacle. The lighting is also pretty good here.
It's just like the only real thing that's unique about this fight is flashing lightning. That's kind of it. Rain and flashing lightning. That's it. The mirror thing is kind of cool, but not enough to put him as like the most underrated boss. That baffles me. I can't. That my brain can't wrap. I can't.
His moveset is also cool to look at, especially his lightning attacks. The part of the fight that caught me by surprise was when he summoned a whole other enemy just to kill you. That's cool as hell.
That is cool.
He's just a cool boss, and I'm surprised barely anyone talks about him.
Again, he is cool. And you know, I can't change his mind. I'm not trying to. I just heavily disagree.
Now it's time for Dark Souls 3.
Oh, he didn't go to Bloodborne. He went straight to Dark Souls 3. Okay.
A game that's praised for its high-quality bosses.
I got some pretty hot takes on that one.
Who has a super great presence. Darby the Midir, which is considered by many the best dragon boss in the entire series.
Agreed.
And Slave Knight Gale, who's the perfect balance of challenging and fun. Obviously, there are some other bosses that a lot of people love, and one of these said bosses is none other than Sister Frida. However, despite the amounts of praise that she gets, I think she's mad overrated. Okay, please chill and hear me out.
No, get the pitchforks out. Get the pitchforks out right now.
Most of the...
She's very difficult. Didn't like her much at first, but I came to eventually respect her to the point where she is up there as one of my favorites in Dark Souls 3. Her difficulty at least like kind of matches the pace properly, and I like Sister Frida.
Love comes from. Her first phase, while a bit gimmicky, is interesting, as after studying her pattern for her invisible jumps, it gets fun to locate and attack her because it's free damage. Her third phase, in my opinion, suffers from being a bit drawn out, but it's definitely fun due to how much her moveset changes.
It's very difficult.
And how fast and nimble she becomes. However, her second phase is generally what holds her back for me. I don't want to say it's pointless because story and lore-wise, it makes sense to why Father Ariando wants...
I don't know why. Looking at him in the chair right things that you don't think about in the middle of a boss fight is this right here. But look at his chair, he's just stuck in him. Like he glued to it, someone glues you to a chair as like a prank, and you just get up and walk around with a chair stuck to your butt. I don't know why, suddenly this just makes me laugh.
Wants to fight us, but I just think that it draws the fight out for way too long, and by the time the third phase arrives, I'm already mentally drained from the second phase. However, again, this is just my opinion, as I don't agree with that. She's still a wonderful boss encounter.
Well, imagine if you took the second phase out. Remember the boss fake out where they give you a slab and then act like you won? That wouldn't happen if there was no second phase. I think they both die at once and become one. How would he just die in a cutscene? That's lame. Like, we don't want to just watch him die in a cutscene. We slay him ourselves. I think there's something... Now, if he were blatantly annoying and unfair, I would not be saying this, but, you know, I think killing Frida and her father at the same time is cinematic, cool, and not unfair from a gameplay perspective. And we get that fake out. We get that iconic fake out. We can't lose the iconic fake out. Come on. No, absolutely not. I don't agree with this one. I understand what he's saying. I just don't agree with it.
It's just that the second phase really sucked for me. And what's crazy is that her second phase is the easiest, but again, it's pretty easy. Drawn out. Now the most...
She has a weird habit of just like not attacking you while you attack her father.
Underrated boss fight in Dark Souls 3 could go to 3 different bosses for me. The Twin Princes, the Demon Prince, and the Dragon Slayer armor. However, I have to go...
I agree with all those. Those are all 3 pretty great. I don't know if they're underrated necessarily, but they're pretty great.
For the Twin Princes. The Dragon Slayer armor is a close second, but the Twin Princes are for sure the most underrated boss the entire...
I think Dragon Slayer just looks generic, and so people maybe kind of mentally associate that with being generic, but he's actually a really tight boss. He's got a really tight moveset. Those butterfly things on the sides. But I agree, I do love the Twin Princes. They are just so tight, but they're also super unique, and they don't fall in that weird Elden Ring pit of, oh, you get hit by crap that you have to memorize, because first time I played the game, I somehow, don't ask how, I somehow beat them on my first try, even though I had like very little Estus going into the second phase. Like, I nailed that. It was tight. It was like, because they were so fair, they were responsive. They weren't just gimmicky, oh, I'm going to delay this attack for 5 years. Perfect mix of teleportation, gimmick, some magic here and there. An interesting second phase. It was just, I agree. You know what? Underrated, 100%. I love the Twin Princes.
Dragon Slayer armor.
Demon Prince is pretty good too. A little heavy on the damage on the second phase. I think. I might be remembering that wrong, but I remember something about it being kind of annoying. But Demon Prince is also really good.
Princes are for sure the most underrated boss the entire game. The lore behind them is interesting.
Agreed.
As lore was also
I don't know any of this lore crap.
Together they make an excellent fight, as there's a lot of cool visual attacks. The fight is like the Promised Consort, but you know, at home, except it's way better in terms of balance.
Dunking on Elden Ring DLC real quick. I mean, Radon doesn't exactly... I guess he basically teleports. He does like the weird clone dashing thing. I guess he basically teleports. It's more like he moves at light speed, kind of. Does that mean the Tarnished can react at light speed? It's just a question. I'm just saying, bro. I'm just saying we might be kind of overpowered.
It's just a great fight that not a lot of people talk about.
I agree.
Now we have Bloodborne.
Now we have Bloodborne. Dang it, I ain't got Bloodborne.
Sekiro.
Sekiro,
in my opinion,
baby.
there aren't any bosses in Sekiro that I think are overrated. As a matter of fact, I think a lot of them are properly rated by the community. For example, Ashen the Sword Saint is a boss that people hypes up a lot, and it's for a damn good reason. He's literally the best boss in the entire game, in my opinion. Everything you learn about the game comes full circle in his boss encounter. Now, the only boss that I thought was slightly overrated was Our Father, mostly due to how long and drawn out the fight was. And even then, after...
I'm not sure why he's using drawn out as a category for whether a boss is overrated or not. That sounds kind of dumb. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, wouldn't a longer fight mean, you know, more focus, reliance on your own skill? Yeah, I don't know. There's something a little weird with that logic, but whatever. I think Our Father's pretty great. I don't see anything overrated about him. But like he said, pretty much every boss in this game is borderline perfect, to a degree, so...
Fighting him multiple times, I started to see where the hype was coming from. So yeah, overall, there aren't any bosses that I would consider overrated in the game. Cool, but I'm pretty sure a lot of people might have some in their mind. If so, leave a comment below and point out which boss do you think is the most overrated.
Overrated, let me think. Corrupted Monk. Not even close. Okay, I just remembered. People have been hyping this one up recently. I've been seeing a lot of comments saying like, oh, Corrupted Monk is so good. It is. It's a great fight, but like, it's not particularly special compared to any other Sekiro fight, is it? Like, what's so special about it? It's just a good fight. It just does more damage than a lot of bosses sometimes, but other than that, cool fight. That second phase gimmick is kind of cool, but doesn't make the whole fight. Like, so that one's maybe a tad overrated, but oh well, can't win them all.
Now when it comes on to underrated bosses, Sekiro has many of them, but the one that stood out to me the most was True Corrupted Monk. I'm surprised to see how little people talk about the monk. Sure, she doesn't have the same presence and story importance of Ashen, but she's a great boss regardless of that. Her arena is beautiful as it's a bridge surrounded by gorgeous looking trees. The design of the monk herself looks...
every area in this game looks beautiful, shut up.
interesting as well. Now, visuals aside, the boss fight itself is just straight up fun. The first phase operates just like your standard Sekiro boss.
And both phases after that also operate like standard Sekiro bosses. That's kind of my point. And the third phase has a little bit of that terror thing coming out of its head, but like it's like 2 more attacks, maybe 3, and they all look kind of similar. I don't get it. I really don't.
Aren't any gimmicks or anything, just straight up deflection. After triggering her second phase, you can either fight her outright, but now she has clones that can't be locked onto. So you have to position yourself in their direction of attack to deflect them. Or
people actually do that? You don't just hop around the trees or just do the jump skip thing? The critical hit? Why would you want to deflect them? Why wouldn't you just bounce around the trees?
Or you can just skip the phase by stealth killing her from the top of a branch.
Yeah.
The last phase is simple but terrifying, no pun intended, as she grows out a terror-inflicting centipede from her head.
Terrifying, I get
However,
it.
She will
Do you
sometimes
get
break
it?
the flow of combat to vomit something onto you that builds up terror. This is the only weak part of the fight, as terror is one of the worst mechanics in Sekiro as it can insta-kill you.
It's not a terrible mechanic, it's just how it's usually executed is extremely freaking annoying. I'm looking at those headless things, they're just called the headless, I think. Those things are extremely stupid and irritating.
However, that doesn't change the fact that this is a great boss that is truly underrated.
It's a great boss, but not even close to underrated. It's just a really good boss, in my opinion at least. As far as what I think is underrated, I have to say the 2 bosses at the end of the optional ending. The one with, you got Emma and, I forgot the guy's name, Ashen. I think those bosses are pretty underrated because, well, Emma's just kind of a surprise. She's not really that strong of a boss fight, necessarily, but I think it's pretty cool how she just kind of comes out and tries to stop you. And then Ashen at the very end is just like, yes! I think those just aren't talked about because a lot of people probably forget that you even can go back and get another ending because the choice that Owl Father gives you is kind of just out of nowhere. You know, you don't want to abandon the kid, so you just pick the right choice, I suppose. Underrated in the sense that nobody talks about it, but just still good boss fights in Sekiro. Like he said, they're all pretty much close to perfect, except for like Raging Bull, I guess, or the Ogre. Anyways, moving on.
Elden Ring.
Elden
When it comes down
Ring.
to bosses that I find overrated in this game, I have many, but two of them stand out to me the most, and that's Dragonlord Placidusax and Star Scourge Radahn. The only reason why I say both are overrated is because Placidusax, for example, while cool looking, he does tend to stay in one place a lot, and then his second phase, he barely gives you any chance to hit him, as he's always moving around. Now, it may seem like I just contradicted myself since I'm complaining about him not moving, then when he...
No, I see what he's saying. I don't think that's much of a contradictory statement. I think, he does do a lot of standing still in phase 1, and phase 2 he's constantly flying around, diving down, and I don't think it's that big of a deal, personally. I think it's just a unique thing to him, but I can see where he's coming from.
He does, it's an issue, but here's the thing. I think that his first phase can be excused, however his second phase is absolutely annoying to deal with at times.
It can
especially since he has a lot of health. The constant teleporting and flying does provide a spectacle, but I just wish they toned it down a bit. Now when it comes on to...
Yeah, he can just kind of decide to do a lot of moving, so understandable. Not a terrible pick.
Radahn, I just realized that dealing with his moveset and attack patterns isn't as fun as other bosses. Maybe it's because he's...
True, because all you have to do is kind of just stand under him and spam your attacks, and that's kind of it. Not very entertaining.
Riding a horse, and it makes some of his attack windups confusing. And another thing about him is that after the first time fighting him on subsequent playthroughs, whether it's with summons or not, doesn't hit the same. Which is the opposite of most other bosses, as a lot of times I will not like a boss on my first playthrough, but after fighting them multiple times I came to enjoy them. But again, Radahn is just the opposite for me. Now if I had to choose which of these bosses were the most overrated, I would definitely have to go with Dragonlord, as at least with Radahn it doesn't feel like a chore. But with Placidusax...
True, you can kind of end Radahn quickly, especially if you know what you're doing, so...
The fight just feels unnecessarily long and drawn out. He's still a great first time experience though.
Overrated. Let me think. Who do I think in Elden Ring is overrated? I'm just gonna go with my gut, because the first thing that came to my mind is Godric the Grafted. I don't know why. Something about him just... Like, he's got unique... I don't really know why I find him overrated. I just don't find him all that fun, to be honest. Like, he's well put together objectively. That one tornado move could be kind of annoying if you're standing on him, but I don't know. There's something about him that just isn't as amusing as of a boss as I'd like it to be. Maybe it's because I struggled with him for sure. That's not the main reason, though. I don't know why. I don't like Godric. I think he is overrated. Maybe one day I'll be able to explain it. I have no idea. Godric is just... I just don't like him all that much. If we're talking DLC, Mesmer. It's got to be Mesmer, because to be honest, every DLC boss is equally as annoying for the most part, and Mesmer's no real exception. His moves are kind of flashy, you got the snake thing, but I feel like so many people are focusing spectacle at this point that I don't really know what to say anymore. Spectacle's cool, but I care more about the fight, I care more about the gameplay, and he is fair when you get him down, I suppose, but the fact that people call him the best DLC fight is just kind of out of nowhere. Like, so many fights are kind of equally as cool in a lot of ways, and I don't quite understand where Mesmer in particular stands out. My sake, you can hate on me in the comments. He's one of the more fun ones to fight, though. But again, the spectacle thing, I don't give a crap.
Now, when it comes on...
Who does he think is underrated?
To underrated bosses, I think that I might have to go with Ramina, Saint of the Bud. Ramina is one of the...
I kind of agree. I wouldn't put Ramina as my top underrated, but I could see that. I could see that. I think it's a pretty cool looking fight, while also being one of the actual easier ones to react to and not just have to straight memorize every single freaking attack. Granted, the first time I went through the DLCs, yeah, I used summons, yeah, I tried to cheese as hard as possible, but going back, she definitely is one of the more fair fights. I do enjoy the fight quite a bit. Rot can be annoying, but oh well.
Bosses in Shadow of the Erdtree that I wished was talked about more. She has terrifying yet beautiful visuals, cool looking attacks, and an engaging moveset. She has an amazing OST, and her lore is also interesting. The only downside to her boss fight is that there isn't any cutscene for her. Now, while she may not be
I've seen a lot of people complain about no cutscene for her. Is she that important to the lore? Is she supposed to have a cutscene?
Favorite boss in the game, as that title goes to Mesmer, and yes, I don't care, I'm the #1 Mesmer Glazer. She's still up there in my top 15 or even top 10. Again, she's just an amazing boss that deserves more love. A honorable mention I would like to point out is the Death Knight, who should have been an actual overall boss instead of being locked behind
that one was so annoying.
And the Bell-Bearing Hunters. So
Bellberry Hunter was certainly unique. Underrated. I think, I'm gonna go with a really weird one. I'm gonna go with that all-knowing guy. I forgot his name. George the All-Knowing. That's his name. So George the All-Knowing. He admittedly is kind of a slog, a bit lazy, kind of, but also not really. I kind of just really like how he's sort of an all-magic boss. He kind of has ridiculously powerful magic. He sort of has displayed his studies by using so many different magic. I think he's just really cool in concept. His execution is fine, but I think the idea of more, should be appreciated. Sort of this guy who was sort of foreshadowed in a weird way for Shadow of the Earth Tree. He was just like studying all the time. You see him at this desk studying, just constantly studying. And that studying comes to fruition when you finally have to fight him at the end. I think that's kind of cool. He is a little annoying to fight sometimes, but I think adopting more of a pressure, always trying to get on him play style is really cool. I think he's a bit underrated. My honorable mention for underrated is going to go to Radagon, believe it or not. Yes, people say Radagon's great, but to be honest, it's my favorite fight in Elden Ring. Pretty much. I think it's still underrated. I love that fight so much.
Well, those were my picks for the most overrated and underrated bosses from each Souls game. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and let me know in the comments who's the most overrated and underrated bosses of
Leave your comment.
Remember, if you want to see more content like this,
go subscribe to Arkade with a K. Arkade K17. Go subscribe to his channel. He's obviously making some pretty decently entertaining videos. I like it. Probably more entertaining than my own. But yeah, go ahead and leave a comment what you think about any of these picks or your own. Or do you think we're both idiots? Because the answer is probably yes, we're probably both stupid. But thank you for joining me on Ashen Insights. Subscribe for more of this, and don't you dare go hollow.